A millionaire CEO married a poor girl just to escape a forced wedding. Then her real identity changed everything. It wasn't the storm that shattered him. It was the silence that came after. The kind that follows a closed door, a final word, a mother who won't meet your eyes as you walk away from everything you were raised to believe was love. He had power, yes, but not the kind that could keep someone beside you when your soul had forgotten how to be soft. He wasn't running from a woman. He was running from a life that never once asked what he wanted. And he wasn't waiting for anyone. He was surviving in quiet ways, holding the world together with pie crumbs and coffee never knowing that somewhere a man with a broken inheritance was about to find his whole future in the way she said good morning. The rain tapped softly against the marble glass of the Whitaker estate like it didn't dare raise its voice. Outside, Boston's sky hung low and silver, folding the city into a kind of breathless stillness. But inside the Whitakers' private dining room, the storm had already begun. Ryan Whitaker sat at the end of the gleaming mahogany table, his plate untouched, the scent of rosemary lamb thick in the air. A crystal decanter of red wine sat untouched by his hand. Around him everything spoke of elegance, polished silverware, tailored suits, practiced smiles. But nothing felt real anymore, not when the sentence had already been spoken. "But you're going to marry Olga Petrova," Marcus Whitaker said, folding his napkin like a contract had just been signed. Ryan didn't respond at first. He looked down at the food as if it might offer a way out. He wanted to laugh, but something dry, something hopeless. But instead he said what a son says when trying to understand the betrayal buried in civility. "She is 45, he murmured. "I'm 28. Evelyn Whitaker reached for her glass, her diamond ring catching the chandelier's light like a warning. "She's brilliant, dignified, and the Petrova deal ensures 3 tech patents that'll triple the valuation by next quarter." "I'm a merger, Ryan," we whispered. "Not a man, not your son." His father's voice stayed measured, but the steel underneath it was clear. "You're an heir. You've had every door opened for you, and now it's time to pay the price of privilege." Ryan stood slowly. The silence that followed was sharp, like porcelain cracking beneath velvet. He looked at them, his father's pride, his mother's poise, and realized they weren't offering him a future. They were offering him a cage. "I won't do it," he said. Marcus's jaw twitched. "Then you walk away from everything. The company, the fortune, the name, all of it." Evelyn's hand twitched on the napkin, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Ryan's voice trembled, but not from fear. "Do you even hear yourselves? You're giving me a woman like she's an asset. You've already measured her return on investment." "Don't be dramatic," Evelyn said softly, as if heartbreak could be managed with tone. But he was already leaving, his breath short, his hands clenched. He didn't slam the door, though part of him wanted to. He didn't shout, though every inch of his body felt like it was cracking under the weight of their expectations. Instead, he walked out into the rain, quiet, certain. No driver, no staff, just his own hands gripping the wheel of a car he hadn't touched in years. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay. And when the lights of Boston faded behind him, when the silence took over and all that remained was the rhythm of his breath and the hiss of wet tires against blacktop, he allowed himself to feel it. Not fear, but freedom, raw, aching, and terrifying. Somewhere near the Maine coast, hours past midnight, the road narrowed and the ocean wind met him like an old memory. He pulled off on instinct alone, his headlights sweeping across a weathered wooden sign, Fairhaven Inn. He slept in the car that night, engine off, watching the sea from behind fogged glass. There were no suits here, no contracts, just the steady crashing of waves against an indifferent shore. In the morning, Ryan stepped into a sleepy cafe with a hand-painted sign that read, "Seaside Coffee and Books." The bell above the door gave a half-hearted ring. He saw her. Flour dusted her apron. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun that didn't try too hard. She moved like someone who had made peace with small spaces and long hours. Her voice wasn't loud, but it reached him anyway. "Morning," she said, her smile a little crooked but somehow perfect. "We've got coffee, pie, and a roof that only leaks on Thursdays." Ryan blinked. After the night he'd had, she felt like sunlight in the middle of a storm. "Is it Thursday?" he asked. He tilted her head. "Guess we'll find out." The corner table near the window creaked when he sat. The coffee came in a chipped blue mug. The pie was apple, and every bite made him forget what his mother's voice sounded like when she was disappointed. He didn't tell her who he was. Not yet. He didn't mention the boardroom waiting for him in Boston, or the woman with the Petrova name, or the ultimatum that had ended his childhood in the space of one dinner. He just sat there, drinking coffee, listening to a small Tom breathe. Her name was Emily, and by the time she brought the check, he already knew. This place, this girl, they weren't distractions. They were the beginning of something his old life never gave him. A chance to be someone real. Chapter 1: The Girl at the Café. The morning air in Fairhaven smelled like salt and pine. Ryan returned to the cafe the next day, unsure whether it was the coffee, the quiet, or the girl behind the counter that had pulled him back. He told himself it was the pie, but when the bell chimed and Emily looked up, smiled like she was genuinely glad to see him, he knew the truth. "You survived our Thursday roof leak," she teased, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's Friday," Ryan said, setting down his keys. "I figured it was safe." "Lucky you," she motioned to the corner booth. "Mr. Bill already had 3 refills, so you're not our neediest customer. Yet." Mr. Bill, seated by the window, raised his mug and gave a slow nod. "She's lying. The second coffee's free, the third is blackmail. Fourth's a marriage proposal," Emily added with a wink. Ryan chuckled, the sound rusty in his own throat. He couldn't remember the last time someone made him laugh without trying to sell him something. He took the booth again. Same seat. Same view of the coast just beyond the glass. The waves curling and crashing like breath itself. Emily brought over a mug and a warm plate of apple pie. "You don't look like a local," she said as she sat the coffee down. "No," Ryan stirred in sugar, trying not to look too interested in her face. "No." She studied him with a friendly sort of boldness. "Your shirt's too pressed, your shoes don't have enough sand on them, and you hesitated when you ordered pie yesterday. Guilty on all counts." "Fairhaven small," she added, "we notice only thing." Ryan nodded. "I'm just passing through." He didn't press. She just smiled like someone who'd met her share of drifters and didn't judge their reasons. "Passing through is fine," she said, grabbing a dishcloth. "But just don't steal my window seat when I'm off shift. That's sacred ground." He watched her walk back behind the counter, her presence quiet but somehow enormous. She wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but she felt like something rooted, something unshakable. It had been too long since he'd met someone who didn't ask what he did, or what he had. And maybe that's why he stayed. The next morning he was back again, and again after that. On Monday she brought him a blueberry scone. "On the house," she said. Tuesday she handed him a newspaper folded open to the crossword puzzle. By Thursday she had memorized how he took his coffee. "You know," she said as she leaned across the counter, arms folded, "if you keep coming back, you'll have to start helping with dishes." "I might surprise you," Ryan said. "I'm good with soap." "I'll bet," she said dryly. "Let me guess, you work with computers?" "Something like that," he said. "Tech bro?" she teased. "Recovery," replied. Her laugh was soft and real. It warmed him in a way central heating never could. It wasn't until the 5th visit that he met Jack. Emily was wiping down tables after the morning rush when the cafe door burst open and a teenage boy came barreling in with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a Pop-Tart in the other. "Butts was late," he shouted. "You missed it again, didn't you?" He grinned. Ryan raised an eyebrow as Jack dropped into a chair and immediately started assembling some kind of weird circuit board with duct tape and gum wrappers. "You're raising an engineer?" Ryan asked as Emily handed the boy a to-go mug. Emily smiled. "Jack's my brother, and yes, a self-declared inventor. He once rewired our toaster to play music." Jack looked up. "And it worked?" "Small victories," Ryan said with a grin. Emily's smile lingered a moment longer this time. Later that day, Ryan walked along the dunes behind the inn, his hands in his coat pockets, the cold air sharpening his thoughts. He kept hearing her voice in his head, the easy way she spoke to everyone, the weight she carried in silence. He knew what it was to carry pressure, but hers didn't come from legacy or billions. Hers came from the kind of loyalty that didn't make headlines. The next day, when Emily brought his coffee, he offered something he hadn't shared with anyone in years. "I used to play piano," he said suddenly. He looked at him surprised. "Really?" "My mom insisted I take lessons, said it would shape my thinking. She was right. It taught me that some things are only beautiful if you don't try to control them too much." Emily nodded. "My dad was a sculptor. He worked with stone. Said it was the most honest medium. It doesn't let you pretend to be someone you're not." Ryan studied her face. There was something wistful in the way she said it, like the sentence didn't end there. "Is he still gone?" she said gently but not sadly. 7 years now. He wanted to ask more, but didn't. There was something sacred in her restraint. And it made him want to tell her everything. But he didn't. Ryan. One evening, he stayed past closing. The cafe lights dimmed, and the hum of the fridge was the only sound left between them. Emily sat down across from him, her apron tossed over the back of a chair. "Tell me the truth," she said. "You're not just passing through, are you?" Ryan hesitated. "No, not really." "Trouble back home?" He smiled faintly. "You could say that." He nodded, letting the silence stretch. No judgment, just space. "You don't have to tell me," she said. But he wanted to. For the first time, he wanted to tell someone. Instead, he asked, "Do you ever wish you could start over?" Emily looked down at her mug, then out the window at the quiet street. "All the time," she said, "but then I think, maybe we're not supposed to start over. Maybe we're just supposed to start real." But Ryan didn't sleep much that night. The sheets at the inn felt colder than usual, not because the heat was broken, but because something inside him was beginning to thaw. And that terrified him. Chapter 2. The story she doesn't tell. The next few days passed like soft pages in a well-worn book. Unhurried, Ryan showing up. At first it was habit, then it became need. But the truth sat quietly beneath his collarbone. It wasn't just the coffee. It was her. Emily didn't perform her kindness. It wasn't for show. It was the way she remembered the older man's order before he sat. The way she tied Jack's scarf in a double knot with her teeth, clenching a pencil, muttering about school forms. The way she let silence sit at the table without rushing to fill it. Ryan noticed how she never talked about herself unless asked, and even then only in fragments. So one cold Tuesday morning, when she offered him a second slice of pie without charging for it, he reached across the counter and quietly asked, "Why do you eat?" He blinked. "Excuse me?" "In Fairhaven," he said. "You're sharp, you could go anywhere." Emily looked down at the crust crumbs on her wrist, brushing them away like they were reasons she couldn't name aloud. "My brother needs stability," she said simply, "and I owe him that." It wasn't just the words. It was how her voice dropped an octave, how her shoulders pulled in ever so slightly. Ryan leaned in. "Can I walk you home after your shift?" She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "If you don't mind detouring through the grocery store. Jack refuses to eat anything that doesn't come with ketchup." The store was warm and small. Fairhaven Market, run by a cheery woman named Mrs. Goldie, who gave them a discount on eggs and slipped Jack a Tootsie Pop with every visit. Emily moved through the aisles like a rhythm Ryan didn't know he needed to learn. She checked labels, compared prices, ignored brands. Everything about her life was built on intentionality, careful choices, quiet sacrifices. "Single mom?" Ryan asked gently as they walked back toward the sidewalk. Emily smiled. "No, but I may as well be." She shifted the bag in her arms. "Jack's my brother. We lost our parents in a car crash when he was 10. I was 21. Dropped out of school to raise him. And here we are." Ryan slowed. He shrugged. "It's life. It happens." But it shouldn't have had to, Ryan thought. Not like this. Not to her. "You gave up everything for him," he said. He looked over. Wouldn't you? Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth was, he wasn't sure. His life had never been about others. It had always been about expectation, legacy, compliance. He'd made the choice. He had only ever run. They turned off Main Street and followed a narrow trail that opened toward the coast. The waves rolled in steady, folding into sand like breath. Emily stepped onto the boardwalk and leaned against the railing, her hair catching the wind like ink across a canvas. "I used to paint," she said softly. Ryan turned toward her. "What stopped you?" He hesitated. "Everything," she admitted. "Time, bills, grief, survival." He wanted to tell her she could start again, that the world needed whatever lived in her fingertips. But he didn't say it. He just stood beside her, watching the tide. Later that week, Ryan showed up with a small sketch pad and a set of charcoal pencils. "They were on sale," he lied, handing them over sheepishly. Emily stared at the gift for a long time. Then, smiling faintly, she took them with a whisper. "Thank you." That night, Ryan sat on the inn's porch, staring at the ocean, feeling more undone by a $12.00 art set than by any corporate strategy meeting he'd ever attended. He'd spent years building empires, but now he just wanted to watch her rebuild herself. One morning, Jack burst into the cafe. "School talent shows next week," he announced, waving it like a flag. "They said I can demo my wind power generator if I don't set the gym on fire." Emily looked horrified. Ryan laughed. "Should I be worried?" "Only if you value your eyebrows," Jack grinned. Emily ruffled his hair. "You're grounded if anything explodes." Ryan, Jack a mock serious nod. "My." Then, quietly, he turned to Emily. "You raised him well." She met his gaze and said something that nearly broke him. "I just hope he never feels how heavy I was to carry." Ryan swallowed hard. "I doubt he ever will." Later that evening, as they closed the cafe together, Ryan wiped down a table while Emily filled the mop bucket. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "You said you left the city because things got complicated." She glanced at him. "Are they still complicated?" Ryan hesitated, fingers resting against the wooden grain of the table. "Yes," he said honestly, "but not in the same way." He nodded, waiting. "I come from a world where love is traded like leverage," he finally admitted. "My family wanted me to marry someone, for business, for empire. And when I said no, they said I was nothing without them." Emily turned to face him. "So, you left." "I didn't want to belong to people who saw me as a transaction." "And now?" He looked at her for a long moment. Now he want to belong to something real. He didn't speak, but her silence held something that felt like understanding. That night she went home and unwrapped the sketch pad. The pages felt stiff in her hands, like a promise waiting to be made. She pressed the charcoal gently against the first page and began to draw a boy with wind in his hair, a wave curling against sand, a smile handed across a chipped blue mug. She didn't know what it meant, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to. Chapter 3: The Lie. Every time Ryan opened his eyes in Fairhaven, he remembered what it felt like to be unknown. It should have been freeing, and in many ways it was. No one here cared about the Whitaker name. No one whispered valuation when he entered a room. He could walk Main Street without being followed, order coffee without a meeting on the other side of it. But with every lie of omission, every soft silence when Emily asked about his past, something inside him bent under the weight of pretending. Because she was telling the truth. And he wasn't. That morning he woke early. The inn was quiet. Only the low hum of the heater and the call of gulls overhead broke the silence. Ryan stood at the small sink, brushing his teeth with hotel-grade toothpaste and staring at the man in the mirror. He looked like someone whose name once opened doors in Tokyo and Berlin. He ran a hand through his hair. He needed a haircut. He needed a clean break. But all he really needed was more time. At the cafe, Emily was already setting chairs upright. Upright, apron-tied, hair messy in a way that made her look more alive than anyone he'd known in Boston. "You're early," she said, surprised but smiling. "I couldn't sleep." She didn't ask why. Instead, she poured him coffee without a word and slid it across the counter like it was a ritual between them. "Jack's science fair project is tomorrow," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "He's trying to power a fan using lemons. If he short-circuited the toaster again last night. My eyebrows still haven't forgiven him." Ryan laughed, then caught the quiet fatigue in her expression. "You okay?" Emily paused, the claw stilled in her hands. "I'm fine," she said. "Just sometimes I forget what it's like to have help." Ryan leaned on the counter, his voice soft. "Though, let me help." He looked at him, her eyes searched his, like she was trying to decide if she could lean on him or if he'd disappear like everyone else. Finally, she gave a slow nod. "Okay, you're on dish duty." Later, in the back of the cafe, sleeves rolled, hands soapy, Ryan found a strange peace in the hum of a quiet kitchen. He watched her through the half-open door, Emily tying her apron tighter as she laughed with a customer, her voice lifting like sunlight. He didn't know he had stock options that could buy her entire street. He didn't know he had walked away from a world most people would sell their soul to enter. And somehow she still made him feel seen. That afternoon, Ryan took Jack to the hardware store. They needed copper wire, cardboard, and duct tape. For stability, Jack insisted. "You know," Jack said as they wandered past rows of light bulbs, "you're kind of weird for a grown-up. You actually listen to people. Most adults just fake it." Ryan smirked. "Don't tell anyone, it'll ruin my brand." Jack grinned. "Are you going to stay?" Ryan hesitated. "Why do you ask?" "Because Emily smiles more when you're around, and she hasn't had a real smile in years." Ryan looked down at the boy, this curious, wiry kid who saw too much, and said the only thing he could. "I wanna." That evening, Emily invited Ryan to dinner. They sat on the porch as the sky turned from orange to indigo. A single string of lights hung between two beams, flickering like fireflies. The meal was simple: grilled cheese and tomato soup. Jack insisted on adding jalapenos for flair. Ryan choked on the first bite. Emily laughed so hard she spilled her tea. "You okay?" she said, patting his back. "I'm crying," he rasped, but with dignity. After Jack retreated inside to finish building his lemon-powered turbine, Ryan and Emily stayed behind. The night grew quieter. The distance between them. "You're good with him," she said, not looking at him. "Jack, he trusts you. I like him. He doesn't open up to many people. We've had a few." Ryan didn't ask who. He could guess. "He's smart," Ryan said. "He's going to do something big." Emily smiled. "That's the hope. I just want him to have more choices than I did." Ryan looked at her. "You gave up a lot." She met his eyes. "We all give up something. The question is, did we give it up for the right reasons?" His breath caught. Because he hadn't given anything up for the right reasons. Not yet. That night, Ryan walked back to the inn, heart heavy. He sat on the edge of the bed, stared at his phone, still flooded with unread messages from his father. The last one was from 2 days ago. "If you don't come back by Friday, the board votes without you. And don't bother crawling back when you run out of pie and small-town charm." Ryan turned the screen face down. He had built a lie out of silence. And it was growing harder to live inside it. Chapter 4. The night. The beach was empty except for them. Late September in Fairhaven meant the wind carried a sharper bite. Most tourists were gone. The shore was quiet, lonely in a beautiful kind of way, like the pause between pages when the story shifts. Ryan walked beside her, hands in his coat pockets, trying not to stare. Emily walked with her shoes in one hand, the other clutching a folded paper bag from the cafe. They had split a scone on the porch, laughed about Jack's lemon-powered science fair disaster, then she had said almost out of nowhere, "Let's walk." They hadn't spoken much since. Now the tide inched forward along the sand, leaving streaks of silver foam in its retreat, and Ryan could feel when she spoke her voice was almost carried away by the wind. My last name isn't really lame. Ryan slowed but didn't interrupt. It's Coleman, she said, Emily Coleman. The knob had landed like a dropped stone between them. Ryan froze, a chill creeping past his collar. Coleman. As in Richard Coleman, the disgraced oil mogul, the man whose indictment had taken down entire sectors, whose face had once been plastered beside headlines that read, America's most ruthless tycoon. Emily was staring at the ocean, her face unreadable. I changed it after the trial, after he went to prison, after the reporters started camping outside my dorm room. Ryan found his voice. You're his daughter. He nodded slowly. By blood, not by choice. He turned to him then, and he could see it how much it cost her to say it aloud. She wasn't seeking pity. She was reclaiming her truth. When the news broke, we lost everything. My mom, she couldn't take the humiliation. She passed a year later. Stroke, but really it was shame. Jack was 10, I was 21. One day I was finishing my BFA, the next I was scrubbing floors to afford mac and cheese. Ryan felt his throat tighten. Emily looked at him. That's why I stayed in Fairhaven. No press, no whispers, just quiet. You changed your name. It changed everything. But the past doesn't let go that easy. Ryan stared at her. The woman who made coffee for the town like it was an act of worship, who gave Jack a life he could stand tall in, who laughed with tired eyes and stood beside the sea like she belonged to it. He was the daughter of the man his father had called a cancer to capitalism. And all Ryan could think was, she told me, even knowing who I am, even without knowing who I am. Why are you telling me this now? He asked. Emily looked down, shifting sand beneath her toes. Because I like you, and because you deserve to know who you're standing next to. Her voice wavered for the first time. And if this makes you walk away, I'd rather it be now. Ryan didn't move. The waves whispered between them. He could have lied, could have told her it didn't matter. But the truth inside him was pounding, loud and hot. Because I'm lying to you. Because you think I'm just some quiet guy who drifted in with the tide, not the son of your father's enemy. He took a breath, and then another, and he reached for her hand. I'm not walking away, he said. They stood there hand in hand as the sun dipped below the horizon. Orange bled into pink, into purple, until the sea looked like velvet swallowing the light. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, not to cry, but to breathe. She had told her truth, and he had stayed. But he knew. The clock was ticking. Because soon it would be his turn. That night Ryan didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching the wind move the curtains, the waves roll in steady rhythm, and he heard her voice over and over in his mind. By blood, not by choice. He thought about his father's last message. She's Coleman's daughter, isn't she? You have no idea what kind of damage she could do. But damage wasn't what he saw in Uncle. He saw courage, and clarity, and fire that had been forged in silence. And for the first time in years he was more afraid of keeping his secret than losing everything else. Chapter 5. The Inheritance. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. Cream-colored, heavy, the kind of paper that didn't bend unless you made it. It looked out of place in the seaside cafe mailbox, wedged between utility bills and a coupon for canned soup. Emily knew who it was from before she even touched it. The return address said Boston. But it may as well have said Ghosts. Ryan found her later that night, sitting on the apartment steps, the unopened envelope on the railing beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just sat next to her, their shoulders nearly touching. I haven't opened it yet, she murmured. You don't have to. But I will. A beat of silence. They say my father's estate is available now. His shares, his holdings, a trust with my name on it. Ryan stared ahead, the knot in his chest tightening. How much? Enough to send Jack to any school he wants, she said. And enough to build the art center I used to dream about. She looked down at her hands. But it's also enough to carry his name everywhere I go. Again. Ryan wanted to skip, But he didn't know if he could do so honestly, not yet. Not when his last name would hit her like a second betrayal. "I'm tired," Emily whispered. "Tired of the weight of a man I barely knew anymore." Ryan reached for her hand. "Shh." She didn't pull away. "Then maybe it's time you carry it on your terms," he said. The next morning, Emily stood outside the law office with Jack by her side. "I don't want you to come in," she told him. "But I need to do this part alone." Jack, now 16, nodded, but his eyes didn't hide the worry. "I trust you," he said, "but I don't trust them." Emily touched his cheek. "Then trust that I'm going in there, not as a Coleman." He walked into the building without looking back. Mr. Abrams was waiting in a glass-walled room with leather chairs and 2 bottles of water. He stood when she entered, that lawyerly grace polished but not fake. "Miss Coleman." "Elaine," she corrected. "Of course." He gestured to the seat. "Oh, she didn't fit. Get to it." Mr. Abrams adjusted his glasses. "You've inherited full access to the Coleman Trust. The board voted to release the restriction now that you've reached 30 and have no pending legal claim against the estate. The assets include liquid funds, investments, a beach property in Martha's Vineyard, and 43% of Coleman Oil Group stock." Emily swallowed. Her skin prickled. It felt like her father's voice was still in the room, even in death. "There is, however, a condition." He raised an eyebrow. "Of course there is. You must attend the board meeting next week in Boston, in person. The firm wants to formally announce you as the sole heir and reintroduce the Coleman name to the market with a cleaner narrative." Emily stared at him. "A cleaner narrative?" Mr. Abrams hesitated. "Public sympathy, redemption arc, legacy control. They think you're the perfect bridge between scandal and reinvention." Emily let out a dry laugh. "You want me to clean up his mess by becoming it?" And she didn't wait for an answer. She turned and left. That night she stood outside the cafe after closing. Ryan found her there, hands shoved into her coat pockets, breath fogging in the cool air. He handed him the envelope, opened now, pages folded and reread a dozen times. "You want me to stand in a boardroom and pretend that name doesn't mean what it means." Ryan unfolded the top letter, read the words slowly. Her father's legacy had been rewrapped in polite phrasing, sanitized, still toxic. "What will you do?" he asked quietly. Emily stared at the star. I want Jack to go to school without debt. I want to buy Grandma's old house before it's demolished. I want to finally He looked at him. "But I don't want to trade my soul for it." Ryan's hands trembled. He could hear his father's voice again. "That girl is Coleman's daughter. She's just like him." But she wasn't. He was the best of what the Yadanaikwa had tried to destroy. And she didn't know he was the son of the man who had helped ruin her father. 2 days later, Emily asked Ryan to walk with her. Not on the beach this time, but to the outskirts of Fairhaven. There, hidden behind overgrown brush and cracked pavement, stood the Coleman family's forgotten summer home, abandoned since the arrest. A once gray mansion now sagging at the edges, its paint peeling like time shedding skin. "This used to be where he brought us in July," she said. "My mom hated the cold ocean. My dad loved showing off." She pushed the creaky gate open and stepped into the ghost of a life that didn't belong to her anymore. Inside, dust danced in the afternoon light. A broken piano sat in the corner. Emily ran her fingers along the ivory keys, producing only silence. "He used to sit here while he made calls," she whispered. "He never noticed." Ryan watched her trace the edge of the old windowsill. She moved through the space like she was unlearning it, reclaiming it. "I thought money could make a man good," she said, "but all it did was make him louder." He turned toward Ryan then, eyes clear. "I'm going to the board meeting," she said. "But not for the reason they want." Chapter 6. The Confession. The sky had begun to bruise purple by the time Ryan asked her to walk. The sea shimmered with the last of the golden light, and the sand beneath their feet was damp, holding the memory of the tide. Emily walked beside him, quiet, hands in the pockets of a worn denim jacket. Her hair moved with the breeze, her face softer than usual. She hadn't asked why he'd invited her here. She hadn't needed to. Sometimes when something's about to break open, silence knows before words do. Ryan stopped at the edge of the water. Emily. She turned to him, brows lifted gently. He looked at her. Really looked, and something inside him gave way, not in weakness, but in choice. I haven't been honest with you. He didn't move. Didn't blink. He took a breath. My name is Ryan Whitaker. I squeaked. He furrowed her brow. My father is Marcus Whitaker. Whitaker Tech, Boston. We were supposed to finalize a merger with Petrova Oil this fall, through a marriage alliance. Emily stared at him like he was speaking a different language, like the man beside her had shifted form. He was the one who was supposed to marry Olga Petrova. He said, "That's what I ran from. That's why I ended up here." She stepped back, just once, her arms folded, not out of anger, but protection. "So all this time you've known who I was?" she asked, voice quiet, edged with disbelief. "No," he said quickly, "not at first. I didn't know you were a... And after that? I wanted to tell you I tried, 12 times." She shook her head slowly, a bitter laugh rising in her throat. "But you didn't." Ryan's chest ached. "Because I didn't want to lose this. Lose you." Emily turned away, arms crossed tightly, staring out at the sea. "I let you in," she said, almost to herself. "I told you things I've never said out loud. And you were pretending to be someone you're not." "No," Ryan said, stepping toward her. "I was pretending to be someone I could be, someone I wanted to be." She looked at him again, this time not with affection, but with the kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than rage. "I'm not mad that you're wealthy," she said. "I'm mad that you made me feel safe enough to tell my truth while hiding yours." Ryan swallowed. "You have every right to be angry." "If what?" "That if you knew who I really was, you'd see me the way everyone else does, like a transaction, a legacy, a last name." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Now," he said, voice low, "I just want to be someone worthy of standing next to you." They walked back without speaking. The silence wasn't cold. It was wounded, a quiet trying to find the shape of forgiveness. When they reached the edge of the cafe, Emily, "I don't hate you," she said. Ryan looked up, startled by the softness in his... "But I need time," she added. He nodded slowly. "I understood. Because if this..." She gestured between them. "If it's going to be anything..." "I don't want half of anything," Ryan said. "Not with you." Her eyes shimmered, but she said nothing more. She walked inside, the door shutting gently behind her. And Ryan stood in the dark, alone, knowing that telling the truth had been the right thing, even if it cost him the only place he'd ever felt free. That night he sat on the porch of the inn, watching the stars blink into place. What tomorrow? But he knew this. He was done hiding. Whatever came next would be real. Chapter 7: The Boardroom Ultimatum. The lobby of Whitaker Tech was made of stone. Everything gleamed. The walls were dark glass. The floor was black marble, waxed so perfectly you could see the shape of your hesitation in it. Ryan's shoes echoed as he stepped across it, like he'd never left, like Fairhaven and Emily and sunsets on the beach had been nothing but a dream. He took the elevator alone. No assistant, no guards. Just the knowledge that the boardroom on the 46th floor would be filled with men who thought his value was a number. And one of them had once been his father. When the doors opened, Marcus Whitaker was already standing. "Look who remembered where home is," he said. Ryan didn't answer. He moved to the long glass table facing the board. Evelyn sat at the far end, hair pulled into a twist, eyes unreadable. "Shall we begin?" Marcus said, taking his seat like a king returning to the throne. The boardroom overlooked the skyline. It was the kind of view people spent lifetimes chasing. But Ryan didn't care. He looked only at the faces that had dictated the shape of his life since childhood. Marcus folded his hands. "Here's the deal. The Petrova merger is still on the table. Olga is still willing. The company has already drafted the joint press release. All that's left is you. Ryan disappeared. But let me be clear, Marcus continued. This isn't personal, this is business. You marry Olga, we control 61% of energy access to Europe within the next fiscal cycle. And if I don't, no betrayal. You walk, Marcus said. Out of the company. Out of your shares. Out of the trust. We strip the Whitaker name from any legal connection to you. You'll be a ghost. Just a man with a last name and no doors left to open. Ryan took a breath. He looked at each of them, their suits, their pens, their polished masks. Then he spoke. You're wrong about one thing. Marcus arched an eyebrow. This is personal. Ryan's voice was quiet, but every syllable hit like a hammer. Because you made my entire life about how much I could add to your power. And I let you. I traded myself for your approval, until I couldn't recognize the man in the mirror. He stepped back. I'm not marrying anyone for your contracts. I'm not becoming a pawn again. And if it means losing the company, then so be it. There was a ripple of whispers around the table. Marcus leaned back, mouth hard. Then you're no son of mine. Evil M flinched. Ryan turned to her, expecting more silence, but she stood slowly, hands trembling. You may not be a Whitaker by control, she said, her voice soft, but you are my son, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. It stunned the room. Marcus's eyes burned. You would throw away 30 years of legacy. I'm not throwing it away, Ryan said, freeing myself from it. And with that, he walked. No money, no shares, no golden leash. Just air in his lungs and the weight of finally being free. That night, Ryan didn't return to the penthouse. He didn't check into a hotel. He drove until the skyline disappeared again, and the sound of waves came back into focus. Fairhaven. Emily. When he stepped into the cafe the next morning, Emily was at the register, scribbling on a yellow order pad. He looked up, her eyes widened just slightly. Be back so soon? She asked. Ryan walked up to the counter, took a slow breath. I told them no, he said. Emily blinked. He walked away from the company. The inheritance, the name, everything. He didn't speak right away, just studied his face like she was trying to see if he meant it. I want to build something from the ground up, he added, not from my father's ruins. I paused. And I want to do it here, if you'll let me. Emily folded the paper pad slowly. I'm not a consolation prize, Ryan. I know, he said. You're the real thing. He looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Then start with coffee. We're short-staffed again. Ryan smiled. And for the first time in his life he felt rich, without money. Chapter 8. The day she said yes. Emily hadn't worn a dress in years. But that morning she stood in front of her second-hand mirror in a navy blue-wrapped dress that still had the price tag from the consignment shop dangling at the hem. Her hair was pinned back, neat but soft. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her earrings. Jack watched from the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. You look, he squinted, responsible like someone who charges interest. Emily snorted. Don't make me cry before I destroy a boardroom. He stepped closer. You sure you want to do this? Jack nodded. Then go get them. The Bothan office hadn't changed. Same glass walls, same brushed steel elevator buttons, same receptionist with the half-fake smile and eyes that knew every name in oil. But this time Emily wasn't hiding. She walked into the boardroom flanked by Mr. Abrams. The directors looked up, surprised but intrigued. One of them cleared his throat. Miss Coleman, thank you for agreeing to meet. I'm here to clarify terms, she interrupted, sliding a folder onto the table. They blinked. Emily spoke with calm fire. I accept the trust, but only if you agree to these conditions. A portion will be allocated to a non-degrado supporting underprivileged artists. Coleman Oil will fund a coastal cleanup project annually in the states most affected by her father's refinery pollution. He will never serve on the board or act as a spokesperson. This is not about redemption, she said. This is about responsibility. There was silence. Good murmuring. Then one of the oldest men at the table leaned back and nodded. She's not her father. Another agreed. She's better. The vote was unanimous. Emily signed, not with pride, but with purpose. That even she stood on the porch of the cafe, still wearing the dress, bare feet on the wood, a mug of lukewarm tea in her hand. Ryan walked up quietly. You didn't change, he said. You forgot how uncomfortable real clothes are. How'd it go? They said yes, she replied, sipping. I gave up the spotlight, took the funds, and used it to help people Dad never thought twice about. Ryan nodded slowly. So, what does that make you now? He turned to him, smiling like a victor, but like a woman who had finally come home to herself. Someone who chose her name, instead of letting it choose her. He stepped closer. I want to show you something. He followed him down the street, around the corner, to a small plot of land near the shore. It was bare except for a wooden post driven into the ground and a handmade sign staked beside it. The Horizon Inn. Coming soon, a place for second chances. Her mouth fell open slightly. You're building something? She whispered. Ryan looked at her. Kuwabumusu. She reached for his hand. I'd like to help. He smiled. Good. I was hoping you'd say that. Chapter The Horizon Inn. The inn began as a sketch on the back of a napkin. Emily's pen had bled through the thin paper as she drew a porch with wide steps, fairy lights strung across a beam, and a hand-painted sign that read, The Horizon Inn for those starting over. Ryan added crooked arrows for guest rooms and a wraparound breakfast nook. Jack suggested a science corner where guests could power their own coffee grinder using lemon batteries. Mrs. Goldie promised she'd bake muffins if it meant keeping the tourists fed. Mr. Bill offered to fix the leaky plumbing with dignity. Fairhaven was small, but it knew how to show up for its own. Construction began with Rhea in flannel and Emily in work gloves too big for her fingers. They spent the first few mornings clearing out driftwood and broken fences, laughing over the way Jack always found an excuse to use the power drill, even if it was just to hang wind chimes. Ryan, who had once managed mergers worth hundreds of millions, now spent his afternoons sanding floors and learning how to hang drywall without shouting at it. Emily painted the window frames pale blue, like the sky just before you forgive someone, she said. He watched her brush stroke after stroke, realizing that everything she touched felt like memory and hope at once. At night they sat on the unfinished porch with cups of tea and stories they hadn't yet told. Ryan confessed how lonely wealth had made him, how he once thought love came after success, not before. Emily told him about the night Jack cried himself to sleep after their mother's funeral, and how she promised herself she'd never let him feel abandoned again. You kept that promise, Ryan said quietly. Emily glanced sideways. Now you keep yours. He did. 3 weeks in, Ryan stood in the center of the half-framed lobby, sawdust in his hair, hands aching. He looked at the beams around him and felt a strange clarity settle into his bones. He hadn't built this with capital. He had built this with choice. On the 4th Saturday, Emily invited the town. Just a soft gather, cookies from Mrs. Goldie, lemonade from the school fundraiser. Jack explaining renewable energy to anyone who'd listen. They strung up fairy lights between half-finished posts, lit candles in mason jars, and welcomed Fairhaven to their dream in progress. Ryan made a toast. This place. It's not just an inn, it's a beginning, and I never would have found the courage to start it without her. He turned toward Emily. She gave me a reason to stay, and every reason to become better. Emily didn't cry, but her hand tightened around his, and his smile said everything. That night, long after the guests left and the sky turned silver, Ryan walked her to the porch of the cafe, where she still lived. They stood in the light of a single porch bulb, surrounded by soft silence. I've been meaning to ask you something, he said. He tilted her head. Are you free next week? He laughed. You've seen my calendar. I'm booked. I want to take you somewhere. Where? Nowhere fancy. Just somewhere where I can ask you something properly. Emily paused. Ken nodded. Okay. And with that, the next chapter was coming. Chapter 10. The Watch Made of Stars. The rooftop wasn't fully. The railings were half installed. The lights were borrowed from the cafe's back patio. The chairs didn't match. But to Ryan, it was perfect. He had spent the afternoon arranging everything himself. A table, 2 candles, a blanket draped across the bench she loved. He didn't hire a violinist, didn't script his words. Because this wasn't about perfection. It was about them. Emily arrived at sunset. She wore a soft linen dress that fluttered in the breeze, her hair pulled back with the tie Jack always borrowed to fix his school projects. Her eyes met his, and Ryan's breath caught, not because she looked beautiful, but because she looked at home. She stepped onto the rooftop, hands in her pockets, smiling with curiosity. "What's all this?" "You'll see," he said, offering her his arm. He led her to the bench. The sea stretched out below them, pink and gold, as if the sky was blessing their moment. Emily sat. "Okay," she said, "now I'm nervous." Ryan chuckled, reached into his coat, and pulled out a small wooden box. Not velvet. Not branded. Hand-carved. Simple. Honest. Emily raised an eyebrow. He opened it slowly. Inside was a wristwatch. Old-fashioned, gold rim, a mid-digit face with tiny hand-painted constellations around the edges. He blinked. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ryan spoke softly. "I had it made from scratch. No brand, no diamonds, just stars. Every one of them is from the sketch you showed me, the one you drew the night you couldn't sleep." Her mouth parted slightly. "I memorized it," he added, "because it was the first thing you ever showed me that no one else had seen." He touched the glass gently. "Why a watch?" she asked. "Because you gave me back time," he said. "Time I wasted chasing titles. Time I never thought I'd get back." He took a breath. "And because I want to spend all the time I have left with you." Ryan knelt. No fanfare, no audience. Just him, on one knee, wind in his hair, eyes full of everything he had never known how to say, until now. "Emily Coleman, will you marry me?" The world went still. The waves below paused in their rhythm. The stars above leaned closer. Emily looked down at the man who had once walked into her cafe looking like a stranger, and had become the only person who ever saw her without conditions. He laughed at once, brief. "Are you serious?" "Good God." She reached down, touched his cheek. "You left everything you knew," she whispered, "and you built something better." Waggity-puggy-down. But tears slipped down her cheek. "Yes," she said. Ryan blinked. "Yes, I'll marry you." He stood, pulled her into him, and they kissed. Gentle at first, then with the kind of certainty that people spend lifetimes trying to find. The wind wrapped around him like a blushing. The watch ticked softly in her palm. Time, it seemed, was finally on their side. Back downstairs, Jack was already texting the entire town. He said yes. Also, Ryan cried, confirmed. The Goldie responded with a string of emojis that made no sense. Mr. Bill poured himself a celebratory whiskey. And Fairhaven exhaled like it had always known. That night, Ryan and Emily sat on the steps of the nearly finished inn, their hands laced together. They didn't talk about guest rooms or spreadsheets. They talked about windows that would face the ocean, and a life that would always face the truth, the inn that faced the sea. 5 years had passed since the day Emily said yes. The Horizon Inn now stood finished, wrapped in blue trim draped with ivy, and always scented faintly with coffee and ocean air. It wasn't the biggest inn on the coast, but people didn't come for luxury. They came because someone had told them, "If you're trying to start over, go there. They understand." Emily sat on the porch swing, sketchbook in her lap, sunlight falling like silk across her knees. Sophie, their daughter, now 3, chased bubbles across the garden while Jack, ever the builder, repaired a crooked fence post with far more tools than necessary. Ryo stood in the doorway, coffee in one hand, watching the 3 people who had rebuilt his entire sense of home. Behind him, the lobby held books, art from local teens, and a plaque that read, "This place was built with honesty, not inheritance. In memory of the names we chose to live by." Evelyn had begun visiting once a month, quietly, softly, never demanding. Sometimes she brought old recipes. Sometimes she just sat in the sun and watched her granddaughter paint seashells. He never talked about Marcus. Not anymore. Much part of the story had closed itself. On their 7th anniversary, Ryan took Emily back to the rooftop where it all began. This time the watch was on her wrist, still ticking. Time had aged them, softened their edges, deepened their silences, but it had never once pulled them apart. "I still can't believe you built this," she said, tracing the edge of the railing. Ryan smiled. "You were the blueprint." They sat together side by side, watching the sea curl into shore, endless and forgiving. And when Sophie called out from below, "Mom, Daddy, look what I made," Emily stood with a grin, to go be parents. Ryan took her hand. He whispered, "Time well spent." Sometimes love doesn't arrive in grand gestures. It comes in quiet choices. In walking away from power to build peace. In listening before speaking. In making coffee for someone before they ask. Ryan and Emily were never meant to cross paths. But when they did, neither of them saw money or scandal or history. They saw the truth in each other. And that's what saved them. Because in a world obsessed with legacy and loud, they built something quietly enduring. And maybe that's the kind of love that lasts. Have you ever had to choose between who you were expected to be and who you really are? Have you ever walked away from something that looked perfect because it didn't feel right? Or met someone who, without knowing your past, helped you build a better future? If this story touched something quiet inside you, share it. Not just by clicking a button, but by calling someone who stayed when others left. By remembering that love, the real kind, is built, not bought. You don't need a fortune to create something beautiful. Sometimes all you need is someone who looks at you and says, "Start over here."